Well, for more on North Korea's apparently successful rocket launch, joining us now is John Johan Kim. He is the board director of the Chosun Exchange. Just a personal note, John's grandparents were from North Korea, but he now lives in the United States and visits Pyongyang on business. John, welcome to the program.
Hi.
Now, doing business in North Korea and tying in with this latest development, isn't this only going to impede investments to the reclusive state from countries, say, like South Korea and China?
Sure. I mean, I'd just like to qualify and say that most of my business in the DPRK is actually of a nonprofit nature. All of my business actually in the DPRK is of a nonprofit nature. But the DPRK has been going out and trying to attract foreign direct investment, and that's part of the business that I do, is going and helping them understand what works in terms of attracting this foreign direct investment. That's the Chosun Exchange organization. That's one of our mandates. And clearly, an action like this is not going to be very favorable for the international investment environment. There's enough uncertainty for traders and investors as they go throughout their day. Any addition in terms of geopolitical risk is clearly not going to be favorable.
John, I understand that you recently hosted a delegation of North Koreans here in Singapore. Did they have any thoughts on the rocket launch?
Yeah, it was a little bit before the launch was announced, which was December 1st, but we did speak about the prior launch in April. This is a group of kind of mid-level officials from state development banks in the DPRK. They were fully convinced, or at least they convinced me that they were fully convinced that the launch in April was fully for peaceful purposes. Now, whether there's some disconnect between the senior levels of the regime and the people of North Korea, I guess that remains to be seen. But I think most people in the international foreign policy community anyways would suspect that there is some other motives for this launch.
John, you know, Pyongyang could be looking at more sanctions. Do you think sanctions are working?
Sure. Well, I was in the DPRK last year, at the end of the year, and I would say that the sanctions have some effect, but sanctions are most effective when everybody is on board together. And in sanctions regimes around the world, there are different levels of commitment between different actors. So in the particular case of the DPRK, China conducts almost all the business that's going to DPRK, Russia a little bit, but most other countries around the world do not conduct any trade. So same thing in Iran, for instance. Iran, they have lots of oil, it's very cheap right now, but the Chinese can go in there, they can buy it. So I think the main beneficiaries of sanctions are actually the people who do not come and commit to them in the same way that everybody else does. So that's the first thing. Second thing is that I would say the impact on the North Korean people is probably not as strong as it would be, if everybody was on board together.
And as an American businessman, do you think the U.S. government should do to coax North Korea to take a different path?
It's a very good question. There have been numerous studies. There have been lots of debate. I think it's a difficult thing because any foreign policy strategy has to contain sticks and carrots. Right now, most of the sticks are pretty much gone. I mean, the sanctions regime could be a little bit tighter, but in terms of carrots, all the food aid that's kind of been given to North Korea hasn't really yielded any results. They have a nuclear weapon and so forth. So it's a really difficult situation. I think, it would require a much longer discussion than what we have time for.
Right. Why do you think the North Korean leaders persist on doing this? Isn't this only going to further isolate the regime?
Absolutely. I think there are a couple of things. I mean, first, I think you're just showing some clips of the North Korean populace. They're very proud of this act and this accomplishment in their eyes. So it kind of consolidates support for Kim Jong-un, the new leader, and that's kind of on a people basis. Also on the basis of the leadership. North Korea on the surface, it seems like a very unified country, but actually there are a number of different factions there. So as a new leader, as a young leader in a very kind of patriarchal society, it's difficult for him to shore up and consolidate his power base. I mean, his uncle is helping him, Chang Song-taek, who's the brother-in-law of Kim Jong-il. But he needs to have a stronger base, and he also needs to have a little bit more credentials in terms of his military. He's a four-star general, doesn't have a lot of military experience. So just thinking of the Cheonan earlier this year, the other launch earlier this year, and this launch now, I think are all attempts to kind of beef up his resume, so to speak.
All right, and the launch comes just ahead of South Korean presidential elections. Are you curious? Do you see any political motivations behind North Korea's move?
No, personally, I think it's the timing of this launch relative to the Korean election. It's actually happened despite that timing. I think the more interesting timing to look at is 5 days before. This launch happened 5 days before the anniversary of his father's death, of Kim Jong-un's father's death, Kim Jong-il. So, his father left a legacy of military first, what they call Songan, which is a big part of their ideology. And so to kind of evoke positive images of that legacy, I think, he's gone ahead with this launch 5 days before. But in terms of the South Korean political system, I think actually both candidates have suggested that they will be more open and more engaged with North Korea. So if anything, I think it would have happened in spite of the election rather than because of it.
All right. Thank you, John, for your time.
Sure, no problem.
I've been speaking with John Yohan Kim from the Chosun Exchange.